Welcome to Mystery Date, where we dive into the weird, the wild, and the downright puzzling. While our podcast is primarily for entertainment with plenty of laughs along the way, we occasionally discuss serious and sensitive topics. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners, so discretion is advised.
In the tranquil embrace of Northern California's Sierra Nevada mountains, a picturesque town became the backdrop of a chilling mystery. On a spring night in 1981, Cabin 28 at Keddie Resort witnessed the brutal murders of a local family and friend, leaving behind a shattered community and unanswered questions. Join us as we delve into the enigmatic case that has perplexed investigators for decades, exploring the haunting details and the relentless pursuit of justice in the unsolved Keddie family murders.
I'm Christian.
I'm Kate.
Welcome to Mystery Date. It's date night, meaning we get to talk about all things mysterious and weird in our world.
This season is called Into the Woods, and it involves mysteries from woods, forests, and jungles all around our world.
Tonight's mystery is the Keddie family murders.
Get comfy, grab your favorite drink, and let's start the show.
All right, to start, like a lot of our different mysteries, have you ever heard anything about the Keddie family murders?
I have not.
You haven't seen the documentary or anything like that?
No, I actually have never heard of this case before.
Easy enough. That'll lead us right into it then. I hadn't heard of it before I started researching it either. I know it had come up on a few podcasts that I listened to, but it never really caught my attention too much. But once I started diving into it, I was like, okay, well, I need to go back and pretty much absorb all of that information because it is a fascinating case, at least in the true crime sphere. There's a lot going on here that can be talked about. So to get started, we're going to talk about where it takes place, which is Keddie, California. And Keddie is nestled in the serene and lush landscapes of Northern California, and it was once a small and idyllic town that exuded charm and tranquility. Known for its picturesque setting amidst the Sierra Nevada mountains, Keddie was a close-knit community that attracted both locals and visitors looking for a peaceful escape from the hustle and bustle of city life. Keddie was primarily known for its rustic cabins and the Keddie Resort, which served as a perfect getaway in nature. The resort was a hub for outdoor enthusiasts who enjoyed activities such as hiking, fishing, and exploring the dense forests that surrounded this land. The residents of Keddie were known for their warm hospitality and strong sense of community. There was a lot of camaraderie and a lot of just small town closeness that you would expect from a lot of these areas that you find in this region of California. This isn't like LA or anything like that. Like I said, it's to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city life. So there's a lot of small towns. I think now Keddie has a population of like 66.
Oh, wow.
It was something really small. During this time, it was very much fueled by the railroad that ran through it, which was the Keddie Y Railroad. It was a pretty substantial trade and industry influx for the town. Once that did shut down, that pretty much slowly dwindled the town and it just became what it is today. Before the infamous Keddie family murders and everything that we're going to talk about today, this town was really just the classic example of a small American town. It had simplistic charm, it had a few local businesses, including a general store and a diner, and these catered to both locals and tourists who were visiting the resort in the area. Life in Keddie moved at a very leisurely pace, allowing its inhabitants to enjoy the beauty of their surroundings and the simple pleasures of life. In summary, Keddie, California, before these tragic events, was a peaceful, picturesque town that epitomized the essence of rural living amidst nature's grandeur.
Sounds nice.
It really was. Everything I saw about it, it looks beautiful, kind of like Hocking Hills like we have in Ohio.
Yeah.
Where it was influenced by the tourists and the industry trade.
I mean, hey, we always talk about how one version of our retirement plan might be to settle down in some cabin-esque tiny little mountain town in the forest somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it fits for us.
Sounds pretty good.
Well,
this is before.
Yes, this is before our story. So now we'll get into it a little bit more. Before we move on too much, I want to give a quick rundown of all the people who were present during these murders and who kind of come up in this story. So we're going to start with Sue Sharp. And Sue Sharp was the matriarch of the Sharp family who were living at Cabin 28. She was a mother of 5 and had recently relocated to Keddie with her children, and she was just seeking a fresh start after leaving a difficult marriage. Sue was described as resilient and dedicated to just providing a better life for her children. Everything that was said about her, she just wanted to make sure that her and her children had something better than what they left. And you can see that she was very caring, which it's telling. Every story that comes up about her, she mentions her kids, how much she wants to make sure that they are able to eventually leave the cabin. And I know she focused a lot on her art, and she was very big in just building a new life for this family that she has. Next, we have John Sharp, who John was Sue's 15-year-old son and eldest of the Sharp children. He was a typical teenager navigating the challenges of adolescence while trying to support his mother and siblings. John was close to his family and often took on responsibilities to help out at home. He was known among his peers as friendly and outgoing, and he had a good sense of humor. So just your typical teenage kid. Next, we have Tina Sharp. Tina Sharp was age 12 and was one of Sue's daughters. She was a sweet and gentle child, known for her quiet demeanor and love for her family. Tina often helped her mother around the house and was adored by her siblings. Despite her youth, though, she demonstrated a maturity beyond her years, often acting as a peacemaker between her brothers and sisters in the family.
That middle child mediator.
Yeah, you always got to have one. That unfortunately falls to the role of the middle child most often. Then we have Dana Wingate. Dana Wingate, age 17, was a close friend of John and was spending the night at the cabin. He was known for his adventurous spirit and was popular amongst his peers. Dana had a keen interest in motorcycles and often spent his free time working on them with John. His friendship with John was a source of comfort and support for the both of them, and he was almost considered just a member of the Sharp family, constantly around, constantly hanging out with John. Sue was always taking care of the two, just an adopted brother in the sense.
Oh yeah, we've all had our fair share of childhood friends that were part of the family.
Yeah, brought in and then just taken care of just like a sibling.
Oh yeah, or we were that friend who was part of some other friend's family.
We've all been there.
Yep.
Then there's Greg and Rick Sharp. Greg and Rick are Sue's youngest sons. They were age 10 and 5 respectively. On the night of the murders, they were present in the cabin but unharmed. The boys were found asleep in another room, seemingly unaware of any of this chaos that had occurred during the night of the murders. They were described as playful and energetic and often seen playing outside or exploring the nearby woods, just typical young kid stuff. The final person that was involved in this case and that was present during the night of the murders is Justin Smart. He was a friend of Rick and Greg and was also present in the cabin during the night of the murders. He was staying over for a sleepover with the Sharp boys. Justin, like Greg and Rick, was unharmed. The experience left a profound impact on him, and he later provided crucial information to the investigation. The Keddie family murders remains one of the most notorious unsolved crimes, and it leaves a lasting shadow over this small community and all of the lives of those involved. So now we're going to get into the summary of the night of the murders and what happened.
Buckle up.
Yeah, it's gonna get a little dark, so trigger warning for just graphic violence.
Yeah, this is a murder case we're discussing.
Yeah, all the stuff that you can expect in a true crime case like this. Just be forewarned, trigger warning. If you want to just skip ahead to the investigation, feel free, I understand. So, on the night of April 11th, 1981, this horrific crime unfolded, like we said, in cabin 28 of the Keddie Resort. A tragedy that continues to haunt a Northern California community to this day. This cabin was home to Sue Sharp and her 5 children. They had just relocated to Keddie, seeking their new beginning after Sue's separation from her husband, and this evening began like any other. The family was settling into their cabin, getting ready for the night, with Sue Sharp, along with her teenage son, John, and his friend Dana. They were all in the main living area. Tina Sharp, Sue's 12-year-old daughter, was also in the cabin, and Greg and Rick Sharp, as well as Justin Smart, was their friend, was staying the night. So Dana and Justin were staying the night. The rest of the family, they were staying in like a very typical evening they would have. Sometime during the late hours of April 11th or on early April 12th, an unknown assailant or assailants entered the cabin. In a brutal and unexplained attack, Sue, John, and Dana were murdered. Tina is presumed to have been killed during these attacks as well, but she wouldn't be discovered right away like the rest. Sue, John, and Dana were discovered the following morning by Sheila Sharp, Sue's daughter, who had stayed overnight at a neighboring cabin, The scene inside was violent and extremely disturbing, with evidence suggesting a significant struggle that had occurred. The three were found bound with medical tape and electrical cords. Sue was discovered lying on her side near the living room sofa, nude from the waist down. She had been gagged with a blue bandana and her own underwear, and Sue had been stabbed in the chest and her throat was slashed. This wound was so deep that it passed through her larynx and nicked her spine.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so a lot of anger or force was put into that.
Yeah, that's brutal, all right.
Yeah.
That's pretty fucked up.
On the side of Sue as well, there was an imprint on her head that matched an old BB gun. So not only was her throat slashed, but they were beating her with what looked like an old BB gun or just pellet gun. John had been found with his throat slashed as well, while Dana had multiple head wounds and had been strangled to death. John and Dana both suffered blunt force trauma to their heads, and this was caused by one or more hammers that were found at the scene. Tina Sharp was missing when the bodies were discovered. Her remains were not found until 3 years later, approximately 50 miles from the Keddie cabin. The three young boys, now this is where it gets a little strange, Greg, Rick, and Justin, were unharmed, found sleeping in the bedroom cabin, and despite being present, they appeared to be unaware of any of the violence that had unfolded in the living room area.
It's odd. You'd think they would have heard some commotion. At least one of them.
Well, and like we've said, this was a violent crime. This didn't happen in silence.
This was very, very aggressive, and I don't understand how no one could hear that.
Yeah, no, that's the thing, is I don't understand how you can be sitting in the room next to it and someone gets their head bashed in with a BB gun. I mean, that alone, if it's enough to leave an imprint, had to have been extremely loud.
And kids are usually hard to keep down. Like, asleep, I mean, you know? Like,
yeah.
Kids are up all the time. They come and wake their parents up 8 times a night just to be like, I had a dream. I want to sleep in your bed. My nightlight broke. I want a glass of water. Like
1,000 different things.
Kids are always up. That's very wild that apparently none of them heard a thing or stirred at all.
You got to imagine, did they not scream?
I mean, yeah.
If someone just broke into the cabin and started killing, I mean, there's no way all three of them could have gotten killed at once. This isn't a big cabin. I have a picture here.
Oh yeah, it's really small.
Yeah, these aren't big, large, like vacation homes. They're kind of rustic
They're
cabins.
like little cottages.
Yeah.
They're pretty small.
I mean, there's no way that this could have happened systematically, boom, enough before anybody could have made a noise.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you know right now. Our house is considered a bungalow or a cottage. It's bigger than their cabin, and we hear everything that goes on in our house. If our dog is upstairs 2 rooms over and they groan a little bit or they jump off the bed onto the floor, that's loud. We can hear it the whole house.
No, we hear it.
You can hear somebody walking up the steps. You can hear every little creak in the wood floors when somebody's walking around. There would be noises happening. If people are being attacked, you would think there would be some screaming going on.
That's part, like I said, that's where it gets a little weird, is I don't understand. And they're children, so I'm not like blaming or putting anything on them.
So it's not like they have malicious intent here. If anything, they did hear and they were too scared to come out of the room. And then they didn't want to get in trouble later with police officers or something because they were kids. They didn't know. They don't know the rules of what you get in trouble for or what you don't. So maybe they were just scared. But
that's a great breakdown of that, honestly. I mean, maybe they did see it and they just got terrified. I wouldn't want to say anything if I was 8 and I heard this going on outside.
I mean, yeah, like as much as you might want to stop whatever's happening and hope your family's okay, you also probably know I'm a child who's very small and helpless. And if my older siblings and mother, who are the protectors of this family, can't help themselves right now, what the hell am I gonna do? Yeah, even if they did hear something, like if I was a 5-year-old, I mean, I think one of the boys was 5 and one of them was 10 and the friend was like 8 or something. Like they're all pretty young. And if you heard an attack happening, you would probably also just keep quiet and hide under the bed and pray for it all to end.
No, literally. I don't blame them whatsoever. I do just think that that's an odd thing. And that is what they initially said during the investigation, that they were sleeping, they didn't notice anything, they woke up.
Yeah.
But we'll get into a little bit more with the investigation now and what unfolds. So getting into it, The investigation into the Keddie family murders began immediately on the morning of April 12, 1981. After Sheila Sharp discovered the horrific scene in cabin 28, investigators just got to work. The Plumas County Sheriff's Office was immediately notified, and law enforcement officials arrived to just find a chaotic and brutal crime scene. From the outset, the investigation faced significant challenges. The crime scene was contaminated due to the number of people who had entered the cabin before the police, and just this hampered the collection of crucial evidence. And additionally, the rural location and the limited resources of local law enforcement in this area contributed to a lot more difficulties in managing this investigation thoroughly. You have a situation where, like I said, this is kind of a remote town. Not
in the mountains, it's tiny, small population. Of course, they don't have the biggest and most resourceful and, most funded police departments out there.
No, exactly. Well, and just getting here in general, especially in the 80s, who knows how tough that could have been. The initial phase of the investigation concentrated on gathering information through just interviews with key witnesses and most notably the surviving children. Greg and Rick Sharp, as well as their friend Justin Smart, were just investigated immediately. Like I said, they gave their first initial testimonies, which were pretty much, I fell asleep, didn't really notice anything, but as police kind of calmed the children down, worked through their trauma, understandably, of what they were going through, and were able to kind of piece through what they saw through that night, that gives us their actual testimonies, which we'll get into now. Given their young ages, the testimonies provided by the boys were understandably limited, and the trauma, like I said, they endured during the tragic events significantly impacted their recollections. But nevertheless, investigators deemed these interviews crucial to piecing together the timeline and circumstances surrounding this murder. During the investigation, it was revealed that Greg, Rick, and Justin had been confined to their small room in the cabin during the murder, and this isolation contributed to their feelings of just helplessness and terror. And said they could hear some of the chaos unfolding outside, and they were able to patch together just pieces of the night, nothing concrete from what I could find. They never told the police they saw anybody. They never said they heard anything explicit. They just said it was flashes of chaos, which I don't know if that's just trauma kind of blocking it out or what that could be.
Yeah.
But to them, the way they described it, it was very much just flashes coming in and out of the night, all this chaos. Greg, the older of the two, recounted a few details about the events leading up to the tragedy. He mentioned feeling scared and confused and just recalling vague images of the night and the chaos that ensued. He said his memories were fragmented, but he expressed a deep sense of loss for his family, and he felt acutely just upset about all of this. It really got to these two kids, again, understandably.
Yeah, you would be asking more questions if they weren't affected by this night.
Exactly.
Pretty normal response to be deeply upset after you heard/witnessed the murder of half your family and then woke up in the morning to be told, yes, your family is in fact dead.
No, like I said, I don't blame the kids at all, and it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
If I was in that situation, oh my God, I wouldn't want to talk about it. I would just shut me away. And I'm not even in that age anymore. I don't have that mindset anymore. I can't imagine this being your foundation.
You have to go straight into investigation and interviews with police, and you're a child and you've just gone through this. Like, yeah, I would shut down too.
Well, yeah, and if it was trauma that blocked out this information, it's horrible that they wake up in the morning having no idea what happened. Then all of this happens with Sheila, who is their sibling too, and they just have to get thrown into this situation, and then slowly their mind unravels this through the trauma, and they're working through it the same way the police are.
Yeah.
That's horrifying for these poor young boys. Despite their limited perspectives, Greg and Rick's testimonies were invaluable in helping the investigators understand the emotional landscape of this fateful night and the profound effect that it would have on these surviving family members. Their experiences shed a light on the psychological trauma faced by children in these harrowing circumstances, further emphasizing the need for support and healing in the aftermath of violence, especially with family violence, like stuff like this. Justin Smart, in particular, later provided some intriguing details that caught the attention of investigators. He recalled seeing strange figures in the cabin the night of the murders, which raised several questions and provided potential leads for the investigative team. His description of the figure was vague, but it suggested the possibility of an intruder or intruders present during this horrific event. Again, Justin's accounts kind of go back and forth, and a lot of it had to be almost pried out of him through this process. The police, upon receiving Justin Smart's account, decided to conduct a more extensive search of the area surrounding the cabin. They meticulously examined the perimeter for any signs of forced entry, such as a broken window, disturbed vegetation, anything of the sort. Additionally, they canvassed the nearby woods and trails, hoping to uncover any evidence that might indicate the presence of an intruder, unusual activity in the area, just anything leading up to the night of the murders. As the investigation unfolded, detectives also reached out to local residents to gather any information about suspicious figures or unusual occurrences in the days prior to the incident. This community engagement proved vital, as some neighbors reported seeing unfamiliar vehicles parked near the cabin at the time. So all of those were documented and taken in. The search efforts yielded several pieces of evidence, including footprints leading away from the cabin and a few items that did not belong to any of the victims. These findings intensified the investigation, and it led authorities to consider the possibility of, multiple suspects, as I've kind of hinted towards in this, and further deepened the mystery surrounding these tragic events.
I will say, it does sound like it had to be a multiple assailant job. I mean, they had 3 victims, 2 of which who were 15 and 17-year-old boys, so not big men, but
they can put
teenage boys can be pretty tough.
I will admit right here, 2 teenage boys can beat the fuck out of me. I'm sure of it. I will put money on that I'm not winning that fight.
Especially if they were over here fixing up cars, if they were into sports.
Yeah, oh my God, I don't fix motorcycles.
They were over here working. You know, like, those boys probably had a good chance of defending themselves and their mother, at least against one person. But you know, it's one thing if that one person had come in and just started firing a gun and shot everyone to death, but this wasn't that type of murder. They were bound, they were gagged, they were beaten to death, they were strangled and stuff. Like it was not a quick killing. It was a, we're going to torture you to death type of killing.
No, to me, it seems premeditated.
Yeah, and it definitely, I don't see how one person could have pulled that off with all 3 victims.
No, it seems like somebody who knows what they're doing, because of the way they gagged and binded them. Like they knew how to do this, and it like you said, it had to be multiple people. There's no way they can come in, be this swift about it, and leave without any harm or any DNA or anything like that being left by them. I know this is the 80s, so DNA was a very different beast than it is now, so that might not have been as helpful, but they still would have collected it, and today it would have been looked at.
I mean, yeah, cold cases today are still gone over and matched with new technologies and new DNA samples and things like that all the time.
Yeah. So it's crazy. I definitely think what you think. There was multiple people involved here. This was not a random single act of just a murder spree or anything like that. To me, it seems multiple people knew these people, knew what they were doing as well, and executed this.
Yeah.
So getting back into it, we're going to talk about Tina Sharp a little bit and just the discovery of her. And like I said before, she was not found the night of the murders. Unfortunately, she wouldn't be found till 3 years later and about 50 miles away from the cabin. This discovery came, like I said, 3 years after she went missing, as investigators were exploring this area, kind of just looking for any other leads or any other follow-up evidence that they could find, anything that could lead to more information on this case. They were still pursuing it at this time. It was a significant find in this case, but unfortunately it didn't provide too much evidence going forward, but it did give a lot of closure to the family, to a lot of painful and long answers that they were waiting for. I mean, they had no idea what happened until at least the remains were found.
Yeah,
you could assume
at the time she was just missing.
And you could probably assume the worst. If that was my family member, I don't know what I would be thinking had gone. If I saw the scene and then knew they were missing with the same people that did what happened there, horrible.
Yeah.
So to at least have that closure.
Still can't bring much more evidence or leads to anybody. They just have a body.
Yeah, unfortunately. Sucks. Now we're going to talk about theories and suspects. This is the meat and potatoes of all of this, the fun stuff.
Meat and potatoes.
Yeah, that's our dog.
His real name is Samwise, but...
Samwise Kenobi. Tell them the whole thing.
Samwise Kenobi Chewbacca.
Yes, it's pretty great. And it's all, well, not anymore. We got him a new name tag. But at one point, it was all printed on there.
We decided it was kind of hard to read with all these names and not enough contact info to actually get our dog back if he runs out, but...
Samwise was enough.
But we call him Hammy and Ham and Potatoes.
Yeah, if you saw him, you'll see him on our social media at some point. He'll pop his head in one of these videos at some point as well. But he's a ham. He's big. He's chunky.
Yeah. He's hamming it up every day with those lovin's too.
So back to theories and suspects. Several theories emerged over the course of the investigation, ranging from random acts of violence to unknown assailants to a targeted attack like we were talking about before. Investigators considered various suspects, including individuals known to the Sharp family and local residents with criminal backgrounds. One of the prime suspects in this case was, get this, Martin Smart, who was Justin's stepfather.
I would love to hear why. Why was he a suspect?
Reports indicate that Smart had a history of conflicts with Sue Sharp, which raised concerns about his potential involvement in any wrongdoing. His relationship with Sue was described as strained, and it just led investigators to consider whether personal grievances between the two could have motivated him. Additionally, Smart's friend, known as Keddie, hope I'm saying that right, don't really care, because if you're a bad guy, screw it.
I'm sorry, that reminded me of Creed from The Office going, Bo Body.
Bo Body. I mean,
Smart's friend, Bo Body.
We're going to call him Bo from now on. So Smart's friend Bo was also identified as a person of interest in this investigation. The nature of their friendship and any potential shared knowledge about the situation drew a lot of attention from law enforcement. Both men were subjected to an extensive questioning as detectives sought to uncover any inconsistencies between their narratives when they brought them in. During the course of the investigation, it became apparent that both Smart and Bo provided alibis for their whereabouts at the time of the incident, however. Their accounts were marked by suspicious behavior and discrepancies that raised eyebrows among the investigators. Despite these concerns, the police ultimately found that there was insufficient evidence to formally charge either individual, and this led to just frustration among the investigators. The lack of concrete evidence meant that the investigation continued, with the focus shifting to other leads and potential suspects as authorities worked to piece together just anything they could around this case. Martin and Bo were out after a lot of intensive questioning. Yeah, sure, some of their stories were inconsistent. They did have a questionable background, and they had some ties to this case that could lead to a good, solid connection. But nothing came up from that.
Not enough evidence to do anything about it.
Nothing concrete besides pretty much just, well, you had a strained relationship. You guys have kind of talked about this case outside of the investigation, which is a little suspect. I mean, again, it is his son that was impacted by this and being investigated. So he kind of has a right to, but in addition to Martin Smart, several other individuals were considered suspects in this Keddie family murder case. And while none of them were definitively charged, there were notable figures in this investigation, and there were a lot of various reasons why these people were brought up. The first one we're going to talk about is Johnny Meeks. Johnny Meeks was a local resident and a known criminal. He had a lot of charges related to theft and drug offenses. His proximity to the Keddie community and alleged sightings near the crime scene during the time of the murders fueled a lot of speculation about his potential involvement. And Meeks was known to associate with individuals who had a history of violent behavior, which only intensified a lot of the scrutiny that he faced during his investigation. So you have a man that was seen there during the time, has past criminal charges, nothing really beyond that.
Yeah, they're like, all right, this guy has, he has a bit of a record, mostly for petty theft and drugs. A couple of his friends seem to be violent guys with maybe more of records, and he's in the area.
Pretty much.
Yeah. It sounds like police are just finding any lead they can searching it down, interviewing. They're like, okay, this doesn't seem to go anywhere. Next, what else do we got?
To me, it seems like they knew it was Martin Smart and Bo, and they just didn't have the evidence. So this was more or less just cleaning up and taking out all of the other leads. For Johnny Meeks, law enforcement conducted thorough interviews with him, trying to piece together his whereabouts and activities the night of the killings. However, despite being a person of interest, investigators, like many others, they were unable to uncover any substantial evidence leading him to the crime. His lack of a solid alibi and his past, though, did not provide grounds for charges, unfortunately, and many still question whether or not he might have had some more knowledge that he didn't share that night. He had a connection to the criminal underground in this town, and I do feel like even if he wasn't involved directly in the murders, he had to have heard something. If you're involved in that world, in this small community.
Yeah, he might not have been involved directly, but he knew the people who were, or he'd heard talk of it already and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting that he apparently didn't have an alibi for that night.
Yeah, at least a solid alibi.
That's true, yeah.
From what I could tell, it was more or less like she gave a story, but they couldn't corroborate that with any other.
Yeah, it was like, well, I was home sleeping in bed and I live alone.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so like, sure, that might be true, but we don't have any witnesses to say for sure if it was true.
Exactly.
Then again, no witnesses came out to say for sure it wasn't true because I saw him here at this time either.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. That's like a really big problem in a lot of law enforcement investigations, I think, especially in these trickier cases where there is not a clear line of evidence or DNA or one obvious lead and suspect from the beginning. It's really difficult to be able to charge someone or prosecute somebody for a crime without an enormous amount of very substantial corroborated evidence. And, you know, sometimes that makes sense and that's for the good because you don't want to just be locking up anybody who seems a little suspicious if they haven't done anything.
You can't arrest somebody for being creepy.
You know that guy we got in the back? You better let him go. The creepy one?
Hoodwinked if you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Gem of a movie. But yeah, sometimes I think that's a good thing, you know, and it helps us make sure we're arresting the right people and not just anyone. But I also think sometimes that is the reason some criminals get to walk free, is because it's like, well, we know you did it, but the DNA isn't there, so we can't arrest you.
Yep. And a lot of the times they don't want to go out on a limb to bring this case to trial and be like, no, we think that we have enough. They need it to be concrete because they're putting their careers on the line for this.
Yeah.
And you don't want to lose your job over 60% maybe that you have. Like, yeah, I'm 60% sure that he did it, and we have about 60% of evidence that says he did it. That's 40% that you're going to be just shut, thrown out, and now you're going to be looked at the guy who tried an innocent man for murder of 4 people in the cabin, and he can sue you for defamation. Like, there's so much that can go on from that.
There's a lot of fallout and possible consequences,
Yeah.
You know, and even if it doesn't get that serious, at the end of the day, you take him to court, maybe the jury just has already decided, like, no, this guy's innocent, and now you just have to deal with a little bit of public backlash.
Yep.
And people not trusting you or people not liking you, and that can impact a lawyer's career or a judge's career greatly.
Oh yeah, or an investigator's.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying you all need to make sure you live so that people like you. Like, who cares if people like you?
Well, no, and
But in certain positions, you do need the public's backing.
yeah.
So yeah, it's a tricky place to be with those types of investigations for sure, because it's like, man, like, you're grabbing at straws here, but also, yeah, you don't have the evidence, so it kind of sucks sometimes.
Yeah, and we'll see that with a lot of the other suspects that we're going to talk about. We have 2 more we're going to talk about, but more or less I'm just going to skim over it. There was a man named Ed or Edwin. He had a history of violent behavior and was a known criminal and known for his interactions with law enforcement in the area. His past definitely made him a suspect and put him in the eye of investigators. But despite initial interest, investigators could not find any concrete evidence or anything connecting him to these murders. His whereabouts during the critical time frame were somewhat ambiguous, and although he had a profile of someone who could commit these crimes, the lack of any hard evidence ultimately cleared him from the list of suspects. So it's just time and time again, we see whoever did this didn't leave much, or something's going on in the investigation.
Yeah, I mean, to have almost no evidence and almost no real leads, it sounds like they're just kind of pulling up the criminal records of their area and being like, all right, let's hunt down the guys with criminal pasts and see if it was one of them. Like anybody we know who could have done this, even if there's no obvious connection, it sounds like they're just kind of going through the list of people they already have problems with because they have no idea where else to look. There's no real leads.
Nothing was really left behind. I just double checked to make sure, but all they were really working with was some blood splatter. I know they found 2 bloody knives and 1 hammer. Unfortunately, like I said, this is 81. I don't know how much DNA could have been going on, and I know that a lot of people were in and out of this house during the investigation, so who knows what they could really pull from those. Even today, we'll talk about it a little bit, but modern DNA has not been able to do too much with this case. So
clear fingerprints, no clear DNA traces through blood matches. Everything's too muddled.
Yeah. So that brings me to our next point, which is a kind of a good segue. There are some other theories outside of individuals in this case, which talk about a cover-up. The Keddie cabin murders have long been shrouded in mystery, and not only because of the brutality of the crime that happened, but also due to theories suggesting a possible cover-up by individuals or entities involved in this investigation. These theories have been fueled by inconsistencies in the handling of the case, and the suspicion of some information may have been intentionally suppressed or mismanaged, like I was kind of hinting at before. It seems like they didn't really gather too much from this.
Yeah, maybe some investigator or police officer had a beef with the Sharps or knew the person who did it, you know?
I try to intentionally keep a lot of my research unbiased. I don't want to pick a side and automatically lead you through the story telling you, okay, well, we pretty much assume it's Martin Smart based on how the storytelling is. Most people do that. If you look up this story anywhere else, most people present a lot of evidence that was given that Martin Smart is the de facto suspect in this, the de facto person who did this. I, like I said, kind of kept it ambiguous because I'm keeping it from what the police said. But now that we're getting into a cover-up, I'm going to talk a little bit about my own personal thoughts. I do think that something might have happened with Martin Smart, possibly, and Sue. They weren't really getting along. They had a tense past. His son, Justin, was in the room with Greg and Rick. They didn't die. Were Greg and Rick supposed to be murdered as well? But because Justin was in there and it was Martin performing the act? Because otherwise he could just go in there and murder those 3 boys.
Yeah, why leave the boys
or even
alive?
Keep Justin alive if it was someone hired. Because why? But if Justin knew it was Martin.
Justin did have some back and forth in his statements with the police as well. But again, he's a kid.
Yes, he was a kid.
You know?
I'm not putting anything on Justin. If anything, I'd be putting it on Martin, who intentionally stayed out of that room.
Yeah. I'm not sure what I think happened in this case, honestly. I think a lot of these theories are plausible. It could have been Martin Smart and some sort of team he had. It could have been one of the random violent criminals of the area. Maybe they just chose a new target and they figured this was the family to go after this time. Who knows why they didn't kill the young boys?
Well, hold on to that thought, because we're going to talk a little bit more about the law enforcement corruption, and then we'll dive into our final.
Yeah, I mean, hey, law enforcement corruption is not out of the question either.
That's why I wanted to give my thoughts just a little tad bit, is because I think they, like a lot of our stories might, I think it's going to be more than one theory.
Yeah, a little bit of a connection between the two.
Yeah. Like I said, with the cover-up theory, you have a contaminated crime scene. So the crime scene was reportedly compromised early on, with multiple individuals entering the cabin before it was secured by law enforcement. This led to the loss of potential evidence and raised questions about whether this was due to incompetence or an intentional effort to obscure any truths that were left. There was also just incomplete investigations. There are claims that not all the potential suspects were thoroughly investigated. Some believe that certain individuals with connections to local law enforcement may have been shielded from scrutiny. This includes Martin Smart, who reportedly had a tumultuous relationship with Sue Smart and whose potential involvement was downplayed despite various pieces of circumstantial evidence. And Martin Smart, interestingly enough, did have connections to the Plumas County Sheriff's Department. So I think that's interesting. It's not that he was a police officer or anything like that, but he did have friends and knew certain sheriffs and officers in that department.
It's all about who you know.
There was also a lot of key pieces of evidence, such as a bloody fingerprint and medical tape that were allegedly misplaced or not analyzed thoroughly. And the disappearance of this such evidence has led to speculation about, again, whether it was deliberately hidden to protect certain individuals. So there were things at this crime scene that are now gone that modern DNA cannot investigate because somebody got rid of it.
Yeah, and that does raise the question of incompetence versus deliberately fucking with an investigation. But honestly, I think either way, the cops are partially at fault for not having any answers to this case. I'm not saying that they were involved in the murder or even that they deliberately tried to cover it up. But if you're that incompetent where you're not securing a crime scene, you're losing evidence, you're not analyzing the evidence at the lab when it's supposed to be, you're letting suspects go when you haven't interviewed them thoroughly, you're being complicit in letting criminals get away. You know, your job is to protect and serve. You gotta do your job thoroughly.
Well, and you also got a question too, if it was the county sheriff department. Keddie is a resort town in, I'm assuming, not a very populated county. A murder like this happening would destroy the town.
Oh yeah.
Even if it wasn't a cover up in the sense of they knew Martin and they were out to kill this family and save whatever. It could have just been a cover up in the sense of, no, we can't let this get out of hand.
Yeah. They didn't want it to destroy the town any further by a certain suspect who maybe was this well-known and even idolized person in the community. They're like, we can't let them know our town is full of all this badness.
Yeah.
It had to have been someone from outside. We don't know. Just keep it a mystery because that's better than knowing the dark truth.
I can very well see that too. Just a small town being like, shit, if this gets out or if we find one of our own is responsible for this, who knows what the hell could happen, especially somebody who knows the sheriff's department. It's just all very messy.
Sounds like some Riverdale shit.
Yeah, I was about to say, it sounds like some TW, Riverdale, Motel, all those.
Oh yeah, like it definitely sounds like some young adult drama that's happening in the police system.
Another quick theory to point out in the cover-up area is that some people say that there was FBI involvement and influence in this case. And that's because of just organized crime and that Bo suspect we mentioned earlier. There's a lot of theories and some information that points at him being tied to organized crime in the area. Some suspect that the FBI might have been knowing of this attack and it might have been a more targeted thing than really was. I'm not going to dive into all of the conspiracies on that, but more or less it ties into the Sharp family might have had some involvement in the organized crime world, and now they were being almost silenced by this FBI type kind of cover-up.
Interesting.
I mean, think about it. Sue left. This is just me spitballing. I'm devil's advocate. I don't believe this at all. But in this theory world, Sue left a painful marriage, trying to start this whole new life in a remote cabin in Northern California with, even at this time, it was still a small population. It wasn't a famous resort like the Poconos or anything. It was just a resort in the area that was pretty touristy. If you were there, you were probably going to stay there. Why move out there?
Unless you're hiding.
With your whole family of like 6 kids?
Then again, she was leaving a hard marriage. Who knows
Exactly.
just how hard that marriage was? Maybe her ex-husband was kind of a psycho, and he would beat the crap out of her and her kids, and maybe he threatened, like, if you ever leave me, I'm gonna hunt you all down and kill you. So she figured, we better go somewhere far and remote.
Well, and again, the 80s, there probably weren't many women's shelters or areas like that you could seek help after leaving a painful relationship or a abusive relationship like that.
It hadn't even been that long since women had gotten the right to vote and the right to a divorce, no-fault divorce and things like that, you know? I want to know, was her ex-husband looked at as a suspect? Because now that I've mentioned that, like, oh, the whole, what if he comes down and what if he hunts you down and kills you after you leave him? Was he ever looked at? Okay, so it looks like the police investigation did look at Sue Sharp's ex-husband. He was looked into, but he was still living in Connecticut at the time, which is where she had left him from. And he had a known alibi. Like, there really wasn't any indication or evidence that was going to corroborate
He didn't fly to Northern California from Connecticut, murder his family, fly back, and then come up with a extravagant alibi. Unfortunately, as crazy and awesome as a tale and mystery that would be, that's not the case.
Yeah, so it looks like they did look into that possibility, but there was just no real evidence or indication at all that he would have been in the area at that time and had involvement. At least they checked him out, though.
Yeah, no, that was a good question. Honestly, he just didn't come up in my research, so nothing really was written down about him, but that's why, because he was just in Connecticut at the time. They probably phoned him up and let him know what happened, and unfortunately, that was the end of that. So outside of all of the theories and everything else surrounding this case, we're going to talk a little bit about the ongoing investigations and a lot of the cold case efforts surrounding this investigation. Over the years, this case remained active, with law enforcement revisiting evidence and pursuing new leads any chance they could get. Recent advancements in forensic technology, including DNA analysis, have provided new leads that law enforcement and independent investigators are exploring. In addition, renewed public interest and a push for justice have led to increased scrutiny in this case, resulting in the re-examination of evidence and witness testimonies. These efforts aim to uncover new information that could potentially identify any culprits and bring closure to the victims' families, who have waited years and decades for any answers that they could get. The ongoing investigation reflects a commitment to resolving this long-standing mystery and seeking justice for the Sharp family. So now we're going to talk about some little-known facts about the Keddie family murders. I decided to just look up some stuff that people miss, aren't really talked about, or just some odd things that pertain to this case. The first one we're going to cover is the unusual phone call. This is an intriguing piece of information that often goes unnoticed, and it's an unusual phone call that was received by the sheriff's department prior to the discovery of the murders. This call, reportedly made by an anonymous individual, mentioned a problem at the Keddie resort, and the call was made on the evening of April 11th, 1981, just hours before the bodies were discovered the following morning. Despite the potentially urgent nature of the message, the call did not receive immediate attention, and it wasn't really seen as a priority from the department. And as a result, the details shared by the anonymous caller were not thoroughly investigated at this time, and it left a gap in the timeline of events leading up to this tragic incident. In the days following the murders, investigators did attempt to follow up on this call, reaching out to see if anybody in the area had any additional information or had witnessed anything unusual that night. However, this trail quickly went cold, and the significance of this call still remains ambiguous. Some theorists have speculated that the problem mentioned that night had been a warning or a precursor to the violence that unfolded, but without concrete evidence or leads, it's just become another piece in this puzzle.
Yeah, that's very odd. I mean, what a way to call the police. I'm calling anonymously to report a problem at the resort. Click.
And it just goes to show, too, how much this is the 80s. If you call the police today and hang up,
they'll just trace you.
They're coming.
They know where you're at.
They're coming to your house. If you don't need them, they will come to your house if you dial them. That's how it is. In 81, apparently they get a call saying, hey, there's a problem at the Keddie resort. And that guy was like, we'll get to it.
Yeah.
So that just goes to show you either how remote or how, I don't want to say, I hate to say it, incompetent maybe this police force was. Something was going on.
Yeah, that's definitely fishy.
I know it was before the murder, so obviously it was a quiet, peaceful town, but I just feel like, hey, there's a problem. Even if they did just hang up,
I mean, at least go check it out. You're not currently investigating a big murder scene or anything, so what else is your priority exactly? You live in a teeny tiny town. Somebody calls 911, go freaking help them.
Tina Sharp is what we're going to talk about next. I know we kind of talked about her a little bit before, but the discovery of her skull is still a very interesting fact. And it was discovered in 1984, like I said, 3 years after the original event, by a bottle collector in the remote area known as Camp 18. This was 50 miles away from Keddie, and there were still explorers and search parties out in this area. I'm pretty sure the bottle collector himself was a part of it. Regardless, that's who ended up finding it. The discovery of her skull was found along with a fragment of tape that was found nearby, and this raised just numerous questions and added a disturbing layer to the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Investigators examined the skull for any sign of trauma that could indicate the cause of death, hoping it would provide crucial clues about what happened to Tina. But the presence of the tape fragment suggested that she might have just been bound.
I mean, her mom and brother and the family friend had also been bound in medical tape.
Yeah.
So it's not a far reach to say that the assailants had also taped her up. Maybe they originally brought her with them when they left. Maybe she was able to escape and run away and then, fell in the woods, couldn't.
That's kind of my theory, is that she probably had a head injury or something. I mean, think about it. They were all bashed in the head.
Yeah.
Cut in the throat.
Getting beaten to death.
She was taped, bound, might have gotten away, and then just they're in the woods.
And she probably had a traumatic brain injury and is running on adrenaline only to get out of there. And then eventually collapses, and who knows?
I'm not saying she ran 50 miles, but she might have gotten a few miles and then animals or something.
Yeah, well, because they only found
a fragment.
Her skull, and they didn't find her entire body. So it's very probable that her remains ended up being scattered by nature, whether animals or weather or...
Yeah, unfortunately. While the skull itself did not provide definitive answers, it became a pivotal piece of evidence that just underscored the brutal nature of Tina's fate, and it motivated law enforcement to continue searching for justice in this case. So at the time, 3 years later, you can imagine interest in this case is probably teetering down a little bit. But after this finding, they were much more willing to keep it alive.
They found the youngest victim so far, confirmed dead, confirmed to have been present at the time of this assailants with the medical tape on her. I mean, yeah, I could see how that would rejuvenate some interest and that passion for justice. Okay, this case was going cold, but now that we know for sure they did it to this little girl too, we're gonna get them. Got a new energy for the case.
The next little interesting fact that is kind of talked about a lot, but I like this theory and this angle, is the connection to organized crime. Some theories suggest a connection to organized crime, given the aspects of Martin Smart and Bo. They had a lot of ties to these circles. Bo was an alleged ex-con with connections to criminal activities such as drug trafficking, human trafficking. He had a lot of violent confrontations, unpaid debts, all around just a terrible person.
Yeah.
A lot of questionable things he was getting into. Additionally, the involvement of Smart raises further intrigue, as his connections may indicate a deeper layer of organized crime operations, possibly linked to money laundering or racketeering. So the two of them were known to be getting into that field as well. Like I mentioned with the FBI, if this was organized crime, maybe Sue Sharp did have, and again, this is all just playing into the theory, did have a connection to Martin Smart and Bo, and maybe they were somewhat tied in business.
Sounds like some Breaking Bad shit.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the last little fact we're going to talk about is just the role of hypnosis in the investigation.
Ooh, hypnosis.
Yeah, I thought this was fun. In an attempt to gather more information, investigators employed hypnosis on Justin Smart, one of the surviving children. Under hypnosis, Justin provided a detailed account of seeing two men in the cabin, Martin and Bo.
Ooh.
He described the first man as tall and muscular with a distinctive scar on his cheek, while the second man was shorter and had a scruffy beard. Justin recalled that the two men were speaking in hushed tones and their demeanor suggested they were discussing something of great urgency. As he delved deeper into his recollections, Justin mentioned that he observed the men moving around the cabin, rummaging through drawers and looking through personal belongings. He could vividly remember hearing one of them mentioning something about the plan and not leaving any traces. Despite the vivid details he provided, though, the information was still completely circumstantial and did not present enough concrete evidence to solidify any charges against the two men, leading them to further investigate the identities and motives of the men described in this scene.
That's crazy. I don't remember if it was Justin or the sharp kid who in the original statement said that they thought they saw figures lurking about.
It was Justin.
It was.
And that was kind of hinting towards this. It's just I didn't get into the hypnosis side of it.
Hypnosis, and he revealed more about these figures. But
Which,
that's interesting.
Looking at pictures of the two men, while maybe not exactly what Justin described, I would say it's kind of, you have Martin, who looks to be, I would say muscular, your typical maybe like home improvement dad, guy working on the roofs. He's got that muscle tone to him. He's got a mustache, so he's got the facial hair. And then Bo looks
got
like
a bit of a beard. He's a little scruffy there.
Yeah, and Bo looks like your classic, almost New York mobster, like short guy, clean cut.
He looks like a business bad guy.
Yeah, and that's almost exactly what Justin described.
Yeah, I don't know if either of the men have a scar on their cheek because the photos of them at that time were a little older.
And nothing...
Black and white. It's harder to see the detail, but...
And nothing I don't think was brought up at the time of any of them having a scar from the police that I saw. So that part is still up in the air. But if it was under hypnosis, I mean, you got to imagine maybe some things were getting intermingled because that's pulling from your psyche. So anything could really come up in that.
Yeah, and I know that hypnosis is still a very controversial and debated tactic when it comes to police investigation. I mean, or just in general, but I do know that hypnosis is still very controversial as to how much people agree on its effectiveness, if it's really working or if it's more of a placebo effect kind of thing. There's definitely some debate that happens there, but I think I believe hypnosis works to a point for sure.
Oh, I believe in it. Yeah. At least to a little bit, yeah.
Works to a point.
So I just thought those are some interesting facts to talk about. The only other thing I want to bring up in this case is there is a documentary, if anyone's interested, called Cabin 28. I watched it passively on my second monitor. It's pretty good. There's a lot of good information in there. So if you're willing to or want to learn more about this case and dive into it and just get more knowledge on it, I highly recommend you take a look at it and check it out. It itself is kind of linked to the rebirth of this case and a lot of more recent investigations that have happened to it. People link the documentary coming out as getting more eyes on it, which is always good. Definitely check it out. In conclusion, who do you think did it?
I think it's probably Martin Smart and Bo
Body.
But it's crazy that there was no real evidence or DNA or solid connection to be able to charge them. So then it makes me think maybe the police are involved as well, and there is a little level of cover-up happening. But I don't know. It sounds crazy. I mean, it does seem a little far-fetched to me to say that the Sharp family was involved in organized crime, just because from all community accounts and everyone who was interviewed about who the family was before the murders, from all accounts, they were this wonderful family. They were caring, they cared about each other, they were nice, they were friendly, they were good people. And not suspicious people. They don't have any red flags really in their past. That seems a little bit far-fetched. Unless there was a little bit more between Sue and Martin Smart than we know. But yeah, I mean, I think that from what we know about this case, it does seem like some sort of combination of Martin Smart and Bo and maybe the police either just not doing their jobs very well or purposefully not following some things through.
I agree with that 100%. I was gonna say, if anything, I would throw a little salt and pepper of organized crime and FBI involvement, just because like that theory. And I don't want to put anything on the Sharp family. I'm not saying anything negative against them. I don't think they really truly had any involvement in this, but I could see maybe accidentally Sue getting involved in something maybe Martin was doing, and that led to their kind of bad relationship, which just spiraled into them needing to be taken out of the equation.
Yeah, or maybe her teenage son was starting to kind of get roped up into this world, and she, snapped at Martin. She was like, leave my son out of your wicked businesses. He's a good boy. And, tensions got high. Who knows? There's a lot of possibilities there.
Because we can see that even though, as I described it, it was almost a mislead in the beginning of the episode where I was like, this is an idyllic town. It's so beautiful and picturesque. Yeah, the more we've gotten into it, you can see there's some stuff going on in this area of California, from organized crime to just petty crime to police cover-ups. There's a lot to be looked at here.
Yeah, and I mean, as much as we might love far away, remote, mountain-esque places, they also, those remote places do make a good location to lay low and keep your activities out of the limelight a little bit. So it does kind of make sense that some crime would be taking place in a secluded location with minimal police forces.
Yeah, it's honestly terrifying. It makes me not really want to go to a cabin for a little bit.
Yeah.
Regardless, I hope eventually in the future the Sharp family gets some more resolutions and that this case can have some more light shed on it, and maybe any more answers brought into the light for the family, because it's terrible to go this many decades with having to just live in mystery. And all of these people involved that I mentioned in the suspects, at least to my knowledge today, it might have changed a little bit, but they were alive very recently. So these people got away with it for a long time. And with that, we're going to go into our date night debrief.
Debriefing from the murder vibes.
Which, if you're tuning in for the first time, this is just a section where we kind of debrief from our mystery, especially in cases like this, where it's a little hard-hitting. You got a lot of sensitive topics, a lot of struggles, and just emotional things going on that, well, now I need to sit back and talk about something funny or off-topic. Any free talk we have or anything like that will be shared in this section, but we're going to start this segment off with a question every time. The question for today is, if you had to watch one movie right now, what would it be and why?
One movie right now?
Right now. You can't think about it too much. What comes to the top of the head?
The Goonies.
The Goonies. Boom.
Because I have The Goonies Never Say Die on my arm, and it is one of my favorite movies of all time. It has been since I was a little kid, too.
I hate to say this because I'm not going to say I'm a cinephile or anything like that, because there's a lot of movies I haven't watched, but I would like to say that I'm a little artsy when it comes to film. But for some reason, when I wrote this question down and I said I'd stick with it, the movie Free Guy came into mind.
Hey, that's a good movie, though.
No. And I was like, well, let me dissect this.
I will say, I would expect your answer to be like All Quiet on the Western Front.
Or like Star Wars, I don't know.
Something either more dramatic and like war or cinematography focused, or some huge blockbuster like the Star Wars saga.
Yes.
Like your answer being Free Guy, while that still fits, it is kind of random.
No, it's very random. I was like, well, let me dissect this. And I think the problem, or the reason why, is because it came out towards the end of the pandemic. And I remember just being trapped inside and watching it at home, and just it is watch the movie, because as somebody who likes video games, who likes programming, even though a lot of it is a lot of far-fetched sci-fi shit that isn't super realistic or accurate.
It is fictional.
It is such a feel-good movie, and Ryan Reynolds is my biggest man crush. Like, he just kills it, and it's funny. Like, it is just such a wholesome, good sit-down movie.
It's just an entertaining movie. Like, you just have a good time watching it, and it's hilarious. There's lots of good cast members and fun cameos.
Yeah. So if you ask me what my favorite movie would be, that's not it. But if you would ask me at that time, what was one movie I'd want to watch right now, it was Free Guy. It'd be easy, I can relax, I can eat, and just laugh. So I like that. Goonies and Free Guy. If you're looking for movie recommendations, then
There you go.
you can take the date night rec and go with Goonies and Free Guy.
Yeah. And they're both feel-good movies.
They are.
They're very different from each other. One is a lot more adult, one is a lot more family and young adult. One's a little bit more adventurous, and one of them is more action-y, I guess.
And you got an 80s movie, which is on theme for
That's
the
true.
story. I don't know if it came out in 81. When did the Goonies come out? I gotta look.
It was in the 80s, I just don't remember the year.
1985, like 4 years after the Keddie family murders, you had the Goonies.
1985.
I love Bowling for Soup. All right.
Yeah.
So that's our answer to the question. If you guys have an answer, please feel free to leave a comment. Let us know what you want to watch. We'll maybe watch it and let you know what we think about it if we haven't already seen it. Do you have any free talk? Do you have anything you want to say? I know, again, we haven't really been doing too much, just besides working at our jobs, working on the podcast, dealing with the dogs, typical day-to-day stuff.
Oh yeah, it's okay. We like the mundane day-to-day.
Yes, no, it's nice. It's solid and busy,
It's
but like not
stable.
too busy.
We're good.
It's perfect. We have
Yeah.
a cruise coming up in May. I am excited about that. We're going to Canada. Never been to Canada. I know this is probably not the best time to go, maybe.
We're gonna have fun either way. We like cruising. We like going to new places. We'll get to see New York City for the first time.
Oh yeah, we've never been to New York, so that'll
We'll
be
get
fun.
to see Canada. We're going to
And
Nova Scotia.
Halifax,
Yes.
Nova Scotia. Yes, it'll be cool. Peggy's Cove, I think it's like a famous lighthouse place that we're supposed to be checking out. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, New York itself. We'll also try to put some videos on the YouTube or at least our Instagram. So follow us on social media so that you can see when we go. We'll post little pictures, videos of us.
Yeah. Little mini travel blog type content.
Yeah. Don't expect an episode or anything in that location because we're not that extravagant yet. But
Yeah.
at least
Maybe one day.
maybe one day. Yeah. Mystery Date at Sea. I think that'd be really cool. But yeah, so I think that's it. I don't have too much more to talk about.
I mean, other than working and cruise planning and business planning, we got taxes.
Oh yeah, we got to
We're
taxes
doing
today right after
taxes.
this. So that's
So that's what we've got going on. That's the real fun adult stuff.
Yep. Got to give the government what we owe them.
Freaking ridiculous.
All right, so I think that's about it. So thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to come back every other week for a brand new episode and a brand new mystery.
We hope you enjoyed tonight's story and episode. Don't forget, you can email us episode ideas or love letters to our email, mysterydatepodcast@gmail.com. And if you are sending an episode idea, please write episode idea in the subject line so we can find it easily.
Also, be sure to share this podcast with your friends or even your enemies. We're not going to judge. Just get our name out there. If you like the show, be sure to rate it and leave a comment telling us why. We love to hear from you, and also let us know what movie you'd like to see right now.
Follow us on social media @Mystery Date Podcast. You'll see updates on the show and our life. And tune in next episode.
That's all, so be safe. Have a great night or day.
And remember,
Every good mystery deserves a date.
Bye.